For more, we're joined by Claudia Samayoa of the Human Rights Defender Protection Unit in Guatemala. Thank you for being with us here on France 24.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You're here in Paris for a big conference. It's hosted by Amnesty International. We saw the images there in that report crossing that border between Guatemala and Mexico. Again, remind us, why are they going?
People are fleeing from Honduras mainly in this time, but Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua do for two major factors. One is poverty. Poverty has increased over the last 20 years in our region, and also inequality. So we have much more rich people and more miserable people. But on top of that, I think that people would have sustained more poverty and hunger. But on top of that, we have violence due to the very corrupt systems we are living through. And so there is an alliance between some governmental officials, police, army, and organized crime. And they have promoted this kind of gang violence. And so
the government, you're saying, is promoting the gang violence?
They are linked to organized crime. Our countries are deemed to be like mafia states or failed states, because sometimes it's very difficult to find the border. For instance, between a mayor that's also the narco trafficker, and he has run the elections almost by himself, by fear. And this had been happening over the last 20 years. So then people get violence is exerted against them on a means of control of territory. And both of those factors makes people flee. And this major refugee situation we have is because someone said that maybe they could avoid paying the trafficking gangs that usually ask them for $5,000 to $10,000 to take them to the border in the United States. So they say, oh, let's all go together, and maybe that way we do not pay and can get there.
So let me just, because you're here in Paris, and politicians here and politicians in the United States, they're saying the same thing, which is, oh, you can't let people into the country simply on the basis that they've shown up in a large number. Do you understand that when politicians say that?
Well, I understand that it's a complex matter. When Guatemala went to war, 200,000 people left the country in a period that less than 1 year. When you have a humanitarian catastrophe, people need to find a way to flee the violence, and you have some terrible histories. People are traveling, and they are handicapped. They're being carried by their family members. They're really having a very difficult situation. So what we're seeing now from the Hondurans is this same process that happened in the 1981, 1982 in Guatemala, is that just basically they couldn't bear it. Someone says, let's go, and they decided to go all together. And it is difficult, and we saw how the Mexican government was not able to order the process of migration. That's why the calls have been for UNHCR to get involved in full capacity.
The UN Refugee Agency, the UNHCR. Yes. And because what do you do for those Hondurans? What's the best way so that, well, their lives can be saved and there isn't this unruly drain of people from the country?
Well, the more important thing, because what we are seeing in the border is a result of the policy, especially of the United States toward the region. So this has a history behind. So the only way to stop the drainage is to really confront the issue of corruption, impunity, and the way that businesses are run without any regard to the law. Of course, I'm talking of long-term processes, but in all the region, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua, we had different types of coup d'etat that had been allowed by the United States and the international community. So that's one part of the responsibility. The other part is from the peoples of our countries that we have been doing the best we can, and is trying to give charity and support, because we need these people to live, not to be dying like it's happening right now. We have already 4 refugees killed just in the border between Guatemala and Mexico. So that's one part. And the other part is people of human rights organizations and my church-based or faith-based organizations, especially in Mexico. There's a lot of places all the route. They are trying to address these people, support, try to stop a little bit some of them so they can get assistance. There are so many babies and minors and very elderly
But it's happening
people.
on a volunteer basis.
Of course, the governments, that's where the government had to come in. And there has to be a solution. These are asylum seekers. These are refugee people. These are not economical migrants. That's an important thing. This is people that are poor, very poor, yes. But they decided to flee because the violence has gotten too high.
One final question for you, Claudia Samayoa, about Guatemala, because we've had recently the country's president pulling the plug on that UN panel that was looking into past abuses and corruption. Your thoughts on that?
Well, that's part of the phenomenon. He is trying to put the plug, and it's part of a process of reaction to the very good investigations and the movement of civil society to stop corruption. So we have 4 presidents in jail, ex-presidents in jail. There's very big business owners, of course, very big also organized crimes owners. And we have seen how what I'm talking to you about, these linkages between the 3 of them, is not a conspiracy theory. It's being proven in courts. So their reaction is what we are seeing. So the important thing is to keep in mind that this hatred discourse that is happening everywhere in countries like Guatemala is basically they are trying to pull strings from different more powerful discourses to try to stop what is really the only possibility of change.
Claudia Samayoa, many thanks for joining us.